Our next speaker is Dr. Thomas Brophy. I got to know Tom a couple years ago. He's a deep-thinking guy, has a Ph.D. From the University of Colorado, and he's an astronomer. He worked on, it was the Voyager program, so he's really has a very good understanding of space, but much more than that. He's been a bit of an adventurer and explorer. We recently interviewed him on our radio show called Cosmic Influence that Jeff and I do, and you can find that interview on there now. And he talked about his recent trip where he just got back from Nabta Playa. And I think he's going to get in that today, but also show us some slides. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Thomas Brophy.
Can you hear me? Is the mic on? Yeah. Thank you, Walter. And thank you, Walter, for a very nicely organized conference. So what am I going to talk about? Well, first, I'm going to give a brief travelogue of an expedition that we made to a very remote area of Egypt in the southwestern corner of Egypt this April of this year with Robert Bouval and an Egyptian explorer named Mahmoud Marai. And then I'm going to talk about the Nabta Playa and this origin map idea related to my book on that topic. And I'm going to mention a little bit integral theory, how these ideas can be fit together into a coherent whole, perhaps. Part of this origin map idea contains this idea of a way to calibrate the Zodiac, which is also the Yuga cycle, and ongoing work. So I have about 3 talks here and about time for about half a talk, so I'm going to talk 6 times as fast. No, I'm not going to. But I'm going to go very fast through parts of it that you can just kind of watch, like watching TV or something. And then hopefully I'm going to slow down on a few parts that you can really wrap your mind around. So I just want to mention this inspirational quote that I had in the program, why it's inspirational. In 1896, Swami Vivekananda emphasized honoring and respecting both the book within and the book without. The book within being the wisdom of spiritual traditions and sages, and the book without being modern science. So this reintegration of that is part of this theme of integral philosophy that I think helps tie these things together. So our expedition this April was taking off from the western oases in Egypt, going down here to this area called Gilf Kabir, and this area called Gebel Uwainat in the corner of Egypt, and actually in Sudan. And this is an area that is really not fully explored. We were with Mahmoud Marai, who discovered 2 important sites down here last November. So it's quite a fascinating region. And the sites we visited there were first a place called Djedefre's Sun Temple. We're now calling it a Sun Temple, actually, after we visited it. And Bagnod's Circle, way out here, near the Libyan border. And Marai's newly discovered cave. And this pharaonic cartouche, which is down here. So this is the really quick part, the TV watching part. This Djedefre Sun Temple, this place was discovered just in 2001. We revisited it, and actually Bouval first noticed that it's facing due east, this carved rock face over there. And in the morning, before dawn, we got up and went to measure this horizon hill, we're calling it. And there's this clearly defined notch And I took GPS measures, and we went back and found that that notch very precisely held the rising sun on the equinox days. And the horizon hill spanned the solstices. So we're calling it, instead of the water mountain, because there was a water sign on the face, Jeffrey's Sun Temple. And the central hieroglyphs there has this solar boat, solar barge. Solar barge usually carries the usual suspects, you know, the major gods and goddesses. But here it contains these 3 stations, which I think may be the 3 stations of the sun on the horizon hill across the way. So we seem to have discovered that this is a sun temple, or the rediscovery of a prehistoric sun temple there in the desert. And we wrote a little paper about that. So, next site, Bagnode Circle. Ralph Bagnode, 1929, British officer and Egyptian explorer, discovered this stone circle out there in the Libyan desert, and it's been visited only a few times since then. This area is so remote and so little visited. We were very happy to find it still very little changed, and it had never been measured. It hadn't even been measured which way it was exactly, north or east, you know, to look for possible astronomy. And we found this very nice east-west alignment in that circle, and Robert Reval was there too. And this very nice north-south alignment on the circle also, and suggestion that this horizon hill there might have been used for viewing the circumpolar stars, perhaps. This circle is probably about, dates to about 5,000 BC or earlier. That's the same age as the Nabta Playa calendar circle, roughly, that I'm going to talk about later. And no, that was Robert Reval. Robert Reval doing something. 10 kilometers as we left that circle, we discovered this remains the foundations of a Neolithic era house. There's lots out there. The famous, slightly famous Cave of the Swimmers from the movie, The English Patient. We took a quick visit there. That's Marai. You got to see that. It's called the Cave of the Swimmers because it has these paintings of swimmers. And it's by a wadi that in that time when there were rains, there's also giraffes on these caves and animals that lived in the climate when it was nice and moist at that time. There's another cave that we visited that I started calling the Cave of the Shamans because it has this, what looks like shamanic imagery, these headless animals with a shaman-like character coming out of them, and all the hands. But that's for another talk. Okay. Newly discovered cave. Last November, Marai discovered this cave. And in this region, there's a motif of bulls and cows all over the place. And these all date to when the area was, had a nice climate. It was before the era of hyper-aridity, extreme dryness that went from about 3,600 or 4,000 BC to present. So these are all earlier than that, perhaps as much as 10,000 BC or so. Beautiful paintings. And this particular cave, in the back of it, there's actually a megalithic structure. This is about a 2-meter stone that was shaped and put there to make the back wall of the cave. This is the Gebel Uwainat, very remote, slightly dangerous region. But this is that cartouche that was discovered way out there at Gebel Uwainat. There's a pharaonic cartouche. It's very faded, but it has the name of a pharaoh and an inscription there that says something like, incense offering from kingdom of Yam to the pharaoh. So there was a brief mentions in Middle Kingdom texts, Egyptian texts, of something called the kingdom of Yam and expeditions to that kingdom used to be thought that that kingdom was down in Sudan, upper Nile, and this suggests that it was out west in the Sahara. Also, one of our expedition members noticed up on an elevated cliff on one of these painted faces, these engravings, as well as paintings. There's engravings all over the place out in that region. And he said, there's arrows up here. So I had to go up there and have a look. And turned out that arrow, nicely carved arrow, put the electronic compass on it, points right at the summer solstice sunset. So there's nice evidence. And the engravings in these regions tend to be older than the painted rock art. So there's nice evidence of astronomy, perhaps, spreading around this region long. Where's the time clock? Oh, okay. What time do I have till? Okay, so starting to tie things together, prehistoric astronomy in the Sahara, the astronomy of Nabta Playa, integral philosophy, galactic zodiac. All right, in 1894, thereabouts, made this brilliant suggestion that we should reintegrate the notions of the Yuga cycle and the Zodiac cycle, the Western astronomy and astrology. And I mentioned that in this book from '98 as an application of this integral philosophy movement towards a postmodern reintegration in which we can start to ask again, re-ask these sorts of questions. Could such cycles have meaning? In his book, he also mentions another motion beyond what Walter mentioned earlier, where the sun evolves around a grand center called Vishnu Nabi, which is the seat of creative power, or Brahma. That's fascinating. I'll get to in a moment what I think that Vishnu Nabi might possibly be, and might be marked in the ancient sites, some of the ancient sites. I don't have to explain what precession is at this conference, except that it's the motion of the Earth's pole moving around in a circle so that the North Star change and the precession and the equinox and solstice points change every year a little bit. They go through a cycle. When I teach integral philosophy, I use my friend Ken Wilber's in which he well, one of the things integral philosophy does, integral theory does, is reopens the validity of questions like, are Yuga ages and Zodiac ages possibly truly meaningful? So this integral approach postulates, works with an outer aspect of reality, which is the book without, mentioned by Vivekananda. It's matter, described by physics, and an inner aspect of reality, the book within, nous, mind, spirit, described by metaphysics. Both of them. So the idea, pre-modernity fused the inner and the outer and kind of stuck with the inner. Pre-modern science was involved. At modernity, science, we developed the separation of the inner and the outer, and the development of modern science. Kind of went too far, though, into a dissociative rejection of the inner. Integral philosophy postulates a postmodern reintegration of both, not a moving backwards, but a moving forward to a reintegration of both. For example, one example of the sorts of questions you can start to ask again, instead of just the physical matter of our body, are there aspects of our being that are non-material, like the chakras and nadis? So you can see how that kind of question is kind of related to the question, could there be something to a Zodiac or Yuga age meaning? It also involves developmental psychospirituality or initiations like we heard about yesterday. So, Nabta Playa, that site that's also in the south of Egypt, but closer to the Nile, about 100 kilometers west of the Nile, let's take a look at what's there. So that site became famous in 1998 when there was a Nature magazine article, a bunch of press releases, and international attention. And there's been a lot of confusion about that site ever since, probably for reasons like this. For instance, CNN got the scale a little bit rough. That is actually this. This is the this is the calendar circle at Nabta Playa. The calendar circle is there with megalithic or large stone aspects too that are very important, perhaps more important. But this is what actually this calendar circle is and what that 1998 article was about. And it's ruined now. And actually now it's completely gone. But we know from their early find what was there. Now I'm going to get to the calendar circle. Okay, at the center point of the megalithic alignments, there was found this sculpture, this amazing sculpture. The archaeologist said it resembles a cow. I had a different idea for it that I'll get into in a moment. But back to the calendar circle, the small stone calendar circle. So from the archaeologists, we know this is how it was laid out initially. And it had these circle around the outside and these two gates, one north-south and one pointing towards the summer solstice sunrise. So the summer solstice rose through that gate. The summer solstice sun rose through that gate on the day of summer solstice. It was reported that they didn't know what these center stones mean. So that's why I first started to study. I wanted to think about what those mean. I approached it as a puzzle. One of the stones at least had this really finely worked aspect. And I'm going to give a little video clip that explains how that calendar circle works, those center stones, I think. See if this works.
The sunrise. So on summer solstice, you would see the sunrise. You could see through the gate, if you were actually watching it, or you could stand in when the sky is still dark. If you're standing here, looking south on the meridian sightline window, you would have seen in the sky the 3 stars of Orion's belt in the location with the configuration and the angle designated by the star viewing diagram, by those 3 stones right there.
Okay, so the idea is you've got this diagram. It's about 4 meters across, the size of 2 men. It's a circle, and it's got this very clear that points to the solstice sunrise and a north-south gate. And we know it's astronomical because it has the solstice thing. And so it occurred to me, well, maybe the north-south gate tells you where to stand and where to look in the sky. Look on the meridian, just like modern astronomers do. The meridian is the north-south line in the sky. And the solstice gate tells you when to look, the day of summer solstice. So you look in the sky just before summer solstice sunrise, when it's still dark. And perhaps then we can find out what the meaning of those center stones were, if there were a diagram. And it turns out that if you say it's a diagram of the sky, you look up there just before summer solstice sunrise, 5000 BC, of course, when the radiocarbon dates for this site were, not now. You saw the 3 stars of Orion's belt, those as if they were a diagram, just at the right point in the sky. So it was a very nice match. Then the other 3 stones, what do they mean? Well, that first match is really very nice and should be easily acceptable. Those other 3 stones, I was searching for a meaning, well, those look kind of like the head and shoulder stars of Orion. So I said, do those match on the same date? They don't. They don't at all. The Orion constellation is tilted way the wrong direction. But it turns out they do match at another date. Let's see if this little video works.
Stars were at this angle, at the correct angle, matching the diagram. The shoulder star, and the constellation was as its maximum tilt the other way, they would have matched this configuration in the star viewing diagram. Belt C and the shoulder and head Orion at the other extremum of the precession tilt around 16,500 BC. He would have gone through a circle, and the Orion's upstretched bow arm is also on the circle. And when the belt stars match, you get another set of matching, roughly the right size, except a bigger man figure.
Okay. Oh, this nice diagram. This is from a video of Carmen Bolter's series that is going to be coming out soon, hopefully. So the idea is you've got this stone circle, and if you notice that other date was 16,500 BC or so. There's been some confusion there, too. I'm not suggesting that the counter circle was there 16,500 BC. See, it could have been a teaching diagram. It was there 5,000 BC, just like the radiocarbon dates show. And it told the user, it was a user-friendly diagram, when to look, what day of the year, summer solstice, where to look in the sky, and what you'll find there, Orion's belt. And then it told the user how the sky moves long term. Because he could intuit, just like I did, oh, those other three stones show the other part of the constellation, the same constellation, the man figure, when it was tilted the opposite way. And it turns out that this matching at 4,800 BC, 5,000 BC, is at a special time. It's at the maximum of the precessional tilt of this constellation, one way. And the other matching is at another special time, the maximum precessional tilt of the constellation the other way. The two sides of the precession cycle. That's why they're about 12,000 or so years apart. So it could have told the user where to look in the sky to see how the sky moves. And it's perhaps not so hard to believe, even for mainstream archaeoastronomers. I went to a conference, I presented this stuff at the annual American Association of Astronomical Society. And afterwards, I was talking to a guy, probably one of the only 3 people who actually have a full-time job title that's archaeoastronomer, afterwards. And he was saying to me, well, a solstice alignment is really no big deal. And he kind of got in this hunched-over position and said, you can be a caveman and you can make a solstice alignment, two stones pointing to a star. And that really gives you the mindset that we're dealing with as to what the ancient mind could have known. But anyhow, the ancient brain was just as big as ours, and we've heard in some cases even bigger. So it was like us, we would assume. And this circle could have worked in this way easily, because this precessional motion of the sky, of the stars, is the same geometrically as the annual motion of the sun. So the sunrise goes north and south throughout the year, the sunrise on the horizon, because the Earth moves around the sun. And as the precession of the Earth's pole moves around its cycle, the stars do the same motion. It's the same geometry. So it just takes caveman to have a little bit of a thought there to see that the sky can move this way. So now we're back into TV watching mode. I'm going to say a little bit about the megaliths at Nabta, the large stones. And I got to studying Nabta and those from testing Robert Duvall's idea about the correlation of Orion's belt stars with the 3 Great Pyramids. And while I was doing that, I found what seemed to be a signature of them tracking, 2 minutes, the center of the galaxy. So I'm not going to go into why, but I seem to find that tracking of the center of the galaxy, perhaps, as well as stars, in the Nabta Playa megaliths. And in this, okay, there's the dates, radiocarbon dates from Nabta Playa. You can see this time span. And in this bizarre sculpture that has now been broken, smashed, by the way, while it's taken to a museum. This gets into the really speculative part of my study. So that first part about the calendar circle, I think, is really solid and clearly acceptable. And this, I note, is really speculative. And I was approaching this stuff as a puzzle, an astronomical puzzle. And when it got to this bedrock sculpture, that's probably older than the other stuff on the surface at Nabta Playa, it looked to me kind of like the Milky Way galaxy. And it turned out the centerpiece stone was placed above that sculpture in a way that would be the same location as our Earth is in the Milky Way galaxy. And they seem to be tracking the center of the galaxy. So why the center of the galaxy? Well, it was mentioned actually yesterday that in a meta-analysis of all of the good paranormal studies or anomalous cognition studies, there was found to be really only one very robust thing, and that is a peak of activity in sidereal time, time measured with respect to stars. So it turns out that that peak, that time of that peak, coincides with when the center of the galaxy rises above the horizon. So I postulated that perhaps and this high time, 11,000 BC, when the pyramids matched the Orion's belt, and is the Zep Tepi of Egyptian lore, and is when Yukteswar identified as the center of Yuga, turns out is when the center of the galaxy has northern astronomical culmination, which is just when the pole of Earth points closest towards the center of the galaxy. So I'm suggesting that that's how the ancients calibrated the zodiac and how we can recount it again today. And it matches roughly with the standard Western zodiac. People disagree about where exactly the lines are in the zodiac, and roughly with Yukteswar's integral recalibration too. So, why the center of the galaxy? What do we have at the center? What's going on at the center of the galaxy? Gigantic black hole. What's a black hole? It's something that rents time and space. It's a singularity. And here we can perhaps, maybe, touch base with the integral philosophy and spiritual traditions again, because in the yogic methodologies, in the higher stages, people talk about a state of mind that's beyond time and space. So just perhaps, there might be some link there. I have a patent pending on devices that will tell us when the center of the galaxy is rising above the horizon. If anybody wants to order one, email me. So we have this dual dating at Nabta and Giza, and that doesn't mean necessarily that we're dating exactly when the stones were placed, but we're telling about the meaning that they were telling us about precession. And the suggestion that the galactic center markers suggest a calibrated unification of the Yuga and the Zodiac ages. March of this year, I'm co-hosting with Robert Val a trip to Egypt, and there are flyers out back. And Laura Pennington is here, and she's the person to talk to if you're interested. So that's it. There's Laura right there. She can stand up.